implications for multigenerational leadership? How can we provide inclusive environments for leadership to be inclusive and to bring on board these different generations that are at work? How would you interpret that scenario that I just painted for you? And what would we need to do for those of us who are probably much further down the line than you guys?
So in my opinion, because I think things are very contextual, and I'm always very scared of generalizations because we all vary in the way we are grown, socialized, and all of that. So to me, I don't think it's appropriate to call people by their first names till they give you the go ahead to do so. For example, at the last company I worked for, I remember walking into the office after my interview process, and I was to meet my the head of the organization, and I immediately curtsied. Like I made to kneel down because that's how I was raised. And immediately she screamed. She was like, "Why are you kneeling down? We don't do that in this office." And call me by my first name. So, but for me, I'm not saying courtesy, but I do believe that you should allow people tell you how they would like to be addressed, whether they are older, whether they are younger, and then we can come from that point. Because it's also very different by country. Nigeria is a country that we're very, like, we value respect a lot. We value all these things a lot. So if you're working for a Nigerian, you should not just walk into the office and then mention the person's name you should allow the person say, "Oh, this is a first name basis office or company. We call each other on the first name basis," or "Yes, go ahead, we're calling me Mr. or Mrs." I do think that's my own opinion and perspective on it, because I noticed that, for example, in the tech field, in the tech space, these things are more laid back. Nobody really cares if you call them Mr., Mrs., just do your job. And then moving to England, I also noticed that my lecturers feel very uncomfortable when I call them Mr. this, Dr. this, Mrs. that. They're just like, "Call me John and let's go ahead with this." Meanwhile, it's not the same because I still have work to do with Nigeria here and there. And it's very different. So I think that is highly contextual, and yes, we should all respect each other generally. Yes. All done.
Thank you very much for that. And I do get the point that there's a level of emotional intelligence you find yourself, and how you navigate that requires that you are aware. There's a level of self-awareness that is required. So I'm going to turn it over now to you, Mrs. Jibril. You lead the Human Capacity Development Unit of a large organization. And I'm sure you also have people in that organization who are probably older than yourself, as those who are younger than yourself. With that context, and I don't want to sway the way you look at this, how have you found that, and what advice would you have for leaders in terms of how to manage that scenario? What would be the best practice in terms of the advice that you give, so that leaders can enjoy the benefit of that world?
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. And I like the place Yomi started from, where she said, she talked about context. I think that more and more, everyone needs to sort of have an awareness, of what inclusion and what diversity means, and the value that the value that diversity brings. I always say, look, I'm going to value collaboration always over and above having a sector I'm comfortable with. So in other words, I think all of these different generations, and especially leadership in any organization, must be aware of the cultural nuances, the diversity nuances. So I think we got to that point where I refuse to be defined by myself being a female. I refuse to be defined by whether I'm a Miss or a Mrs. And I refuse to be defined by any other thing that is not going to empower me. So I refuse to be defined by whether I'm married and so people accord me some kind of respect. I would rather be respected for the value that I bring. And I think that, there was once I was having a conversation with someone and I shared a strong opinion about something, and the person asked me that, oh, are you a feminist? And my answer to that was, I don't really know how to answer that question, because I refuse to be defined by my gender in any shape or form. Am I not giving you the value that you require? Because if I was giving you this same value as a single girl, I will expect that you will still respect it. So in other words, if I would decide to take on that position as well, then I must also be comfortable, because, okay, if I was not Mrs. Jibril, like Yomi said, don't call me Miss Yomi. If I was not Mrs. Jibril, then what are other things you would call me? Auntie Yinka or what? So in other words, I think we must learn to move conversation. So I understand that conversation about this is our culture. And, I think that scenario you gave is really foolish for that person to just have reached out to that person and call them by. I totally agree with Yomi that you should allow people give you the permission to do certain things. But then even if we talk about the Western culture, I believe there's something called formal writing as well, where you're writing to somebody formally and you don't just say Yinka, you say dear Sama. And then you're not going to meet the Queen tomorrow and say Elizabeth. You're going to say Your Royal Highness or Your Majesty. So other cultures are still aware of the protocol when addressing people. I'm not sure that it is a generational limitation. I just think that maybe people get into those spaces where they feel that some of these things constrain them and they need to remove all those blockers. When people enter into a space, I think it's really important, and we have those conversations sometimes. So you might find that, okay, I might call someone by their name because as an organization that's acceptable, but then how emotionally intelligent am I to make that switch when we're out of that space as well? So you're asking that, what are some of the things we need to put in place? I think the ideas of people learning to work across cultures, and people learning contexts, and people having a lot of emotional intelligence really comes into play when engaging in that kind of workspace. Like I said I work with an organization where everybody is on first name basis, and we find it really odd if somebody comes in and starts saying Mr., Miss, Mrs., or cutting, like nobody does that. But then as soon as I'm out of that organization, it would be really foolish for me to be a Nigerian girl and then expect that should apply, or start trying to force that culture around my own personal space, if you see what I mean. So that emotional intelligence in knowing the switch is really, really key and important. Let me stop here for now.
Thank you very much. I see adaptability, learning to work across cultures, learning to understand that there are different spaces for certain kinds of expectations, and we cannot take that cultural element out of it, irrespective of where we're operating from. The same way, Yomi, you said in England, you are always juggling, how to manage that. That transition from maybe your school life and the work life that you still maintain here, and that's really very important.